The Eurozone's been abuzz this week with claims and counterclaims that Greece will or won't default on what appear to be crippling debts, as Owen's been telling us almost every day. It raises the prospect, of course, of Greece becoming not just the first Eurozone member to take a bailout, but possibly the first to have to wipe out its debts and start all over again. So how on earth does a country do a sovereign default? Well, one man who's got experience of not one, but in fact two defaults is the OECD's Christian Daude. Thanks very much for coming in and speaking to us, Christian. Biggest default recent times, I suppose, Argentina in 2002. Just remind us what on earth happened and how bad it was.
We have to remember the default was sort of the end of a prolonged crisis that Argentina suffered. Argentina faced basically, it had a currency board, which means it pegged its currency to the US dollar, and then after the Russian crisis, basically funding for all emerging markets, but especially Argentina, dried up. In this context, Brazil devaluated its currency, and then there came all the doubts about whether it was sustainable, the exchange rate of Argentina. So we had actually a prolonged recession from 1998 to 2001, to the end of 2001, where GDP collapsed around 20% before actually the default took place.
And on a day-to-day basis, Christian, people perhaps remember pictures of runs on banks. I mean, you're talking about social breakdown really on a huge scale. It was nowhere less so than in Argentina. What was it like on a day-to-day basis for people in Argentina?
I mean, at that time, I remember I was in Uruguay, actually, so just across the river, and the situation was not much better, actually. But one of the things that you obviously you notice is taxi drivers talking about spreads, and today it would be credit default swaps, I guess, and this type of things. People really worried about their jobs. So what we're talking about, GDP collapses, also you have also mirror in increase in unemployment. In many of these countries, obviously, there are no safety nets, so unemployment often means poverty immediately. We saw this in Argentina also, poverty going from around 20% to 45%, just in a couple of months, actually.
And huge inflation as well.
Yes, the inflation, I think, was short-lived. It was actually after the devaluation, etc. But wages collapsed, obviously, because of the recession and the depreciation of the exchange rate.
You mentioned Uruguay, of course. That's the second default that you've certainly lived through. You could call it in some ways a sort of market-friendly default, a different experience from Argentina. What do you mean by that?
I mean, this is, in the jargon, it's called like a credit event or something like that. No, it is so we had in Uruguay, what we saw was a voluntary exchange, a debt swap, so market participants accepted bonds basically that would give them less in present value. So they were losing money, actually, if you want, and if you look at the conditions of these new bonds, but they accepted them, and this means that you did not lose access to international capital markets.
And that's the difference with Argentina. Argentina's been locked out of those markets for the best part of 10 years. Only really now we're talking about Argentina maybe being able to go back to the markets. And is that the crucial difference, the fact that Uruguay was able to maintain some kind of presence in international credit?
I think it's a crucial difference. It is also true that it's difficult to see whether countries pay a long-term cost or not if they are very harsh in the terms of the default, if the default is not market-friendly, or whether it's a restructuring that is market-friendly. So Argentina, in a certain sense, was excluded for the last 10 years from international capital markets. It has been able to raise capital at the local level, and investors until the crisis had lots of appetite for these type of instruments. And also, it had also very good economic factors that made that Argentina had good growth prospects, etc. So the access to international credit markets was not so much needed in the last 10 years, if you want. So, but that's more good luck maybe than you know, the consequence of the default.
Just one more question for you very briefly, Christian. I know you can't really talk about Greece or pass an opinion on that, but we hear so often governments denying that countries need a bailout or to default. Surely it's better to actually admit it now and get the pain over with, as Argentina did, than just go on and on saying no, 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 and then suddenly saying yes, in fact, we will have to default.
Probably, but there are a lot of incentives of not doing so. One of them is obviously the politics of this. And the other aspect, I think, that is a crucial difference nowadays is that the international community has learned a lot the things that happened in Argentina. I think, for example, the IMF was sort of trying to understand what was going on actually in the world after the Asian crisis, after Russia, after Brazil. It was sort of changing its stand by country, and this was not good because it created a lot of ambiguity for investors also and for the countries.
Christian, we'll have to stop you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming in. Christian Daude from the OECD. Owen, thank you to you as well. And more news, of course, coming up very shortly here on France 24. Stay with us.